Okay, so picture this. You're at a party, just making small talk, and someone casually says something like, hey, want to hit the road?
Do you picture, like, a road rage incident about to happen? Or are you grabbing your keys?
It's kind of funny how often, we say one thing, but the meaning is, like, hidden,
Right.
tucked away between the lines. And for some people, that's not just a quirk.
It's literally how their brain is wired to process language.
Yeah.
That's what we're diving deep into today.
Yeah.
The world of literal thinking.
Particularly as it relates to autism.
Okay.
You've sent us some really fascinating material on this.
And honestly, I think this is something that can benefit anyone,
Yeah.
whether or not you're on the autism spectrum.
Or even know someone who is, because really at its core, understanding literal thinking is about understanding different ways of communicating.
Absolutely.
And that's something we could all use a little more of, right?
Yeah, it's like expanding your communication toolbox almost, being able to recognize those signals when maybe they're getting crossed a little bit.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's not even just about, autism. It's about neurodiversity in general.
Okay, so before we kind of go any further,
Let's just make sure we're all on the same page.
when we say literal thinking, what do we actually mean?
It's more than just taking things at face value.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. It's almost like that direct literal interpretation is the primary way that someone processes information.
So think of it like this, like, those classic optical illusions, right? Where, some people see a duck and some people see a rabbit.
Someone with a literal thinking style might only see the rabbit in that picture.
Is it not that they can't see the duck? It's just not their brain's, default setting,
So it's like their brain has a different operating system, so to speak.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. And one of the reasons for this difference, research suggests, could be, literally how the brain is wired.
Okay.
For example, there's this idea of what's called enhanced local processing.
That's often discussed in relation to autism.
Okay.
What we're learning is that, autistic brains might be incredibly adept at focusing on the fine print.
The nitty-gritty details.
Sometimes at the expense of the bigger picture.
So they're picking up on all the nuances that, other people might miss.
Exactly. And there's actually a study we came across where they found that autistic individuals often excel at tasks that require this kind of hyper-focus on detail.
They blew neurotypicals out of the water when it came to spotting patterns or inconsistencies in visual data.
Wow.
It's like their brains are hardwired to be these amazing pattern detectors.
So it's not about a lack of intelligence, it's just a different way of processing information with its own set of strengths.
Precisely. And we also read about this concept of hyperconnectivity.
Okay.
Where certain areas of the autistic brain,
like the amygdala, that's like our emotional hub.
Right.
And the sensory cortex, which processes sensory information, might be extra chatty, so to speak.
So it's like they're experiencing the world in high definition all the time.
It's a good analogy, yeah. And you can imagine how that might make it challenging to filter out extraneous information.
To focus on one thing when your brain's constantly being bombarded with stimuli from all directions.
It makes me think about how I feel when I'm in a really crowded, noisy place.
What?
And suddenly I'm missing all these social cues I'd normally pick up on.
So environment plays a role too, right?
Absolutely. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
If you grew up in a household that really valued directness, clarity, maybe even a bit of logic over emotion,
you might be more inclined towards those literal interpretations yourself.
Regardless of whether you're on the spectrum or not.
It's nature and nurture. It's this really intricate dance between, our biology and our experiences.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like our brains are these complex instruments and they're each tuned just a little differently.
Which makes me wonder, how does this literal wiring, how does that actually play out?
In everyday conversations.
Oh, that's where things can get really interesting.
Because so much of our communication, especially in social situations, hinges on, reading between the lines.
Oh, just sure.
Those unspoken cues.
Those inferences that we make.
Yeah, we're practically swimming in metaphors.
Right.
Sarcasm, body language,
It's a wonder we understand each other at all.
Exactly. And for someone whose brain is wired for that direct, literal interpretation.
It's almost like being dropped into a foreign country without a phrase book.
Right. Yeah.
Those subtle social cues, those figures of speech we just take for granted. Those can become real stumbling blocks.
Okay, that makes total sense.
Is there an example from the research that really brings this to life?
There's one that comes to mind, actually. It talked about how a simple phrase like,
don't be a stranger.
Yeah.
Completely backfired.
When Shella said to someone with a more literal communication style,
oh no,
what happened?
Well, the person took it literally.
Like they started overthinking every interaction, worried about,
being perceived as too familiar.
Oh, wow.
Or overstepping boundaries.
It's amazing how, even the most well-intentioned phrases
can lead to these, misunderstandings.
Right.
And I imagine it goes both ways, right?
Absolutely.
It's a two-way street, right? It's not just on, the literal thinker to adapt, right? Yep. It's on all of us to be more mindful of how we're communicating.
Okay.
To make sure our message is landing the way we intended to.
So it's about bridging that communication gap from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
What are some practical things people can do?
Well, for neurotypicals,
I think it starts with awareness.
Okay.
Right? Being attuned to those moments when someone might be taking your words literally.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe they're asking for a lot of clarification or their body language seems a little off.
Those are great things to look out for.
Right. And if that happens,
don't get flustered.
Just take a breath and try rephrasing things in a more concrete way.
Okay.
Skip the idioms and sarcasm for a bit.
Yeah.
Focus on, clarity and directness.
So it's about meeting people where they are communication-wise. And for autistic individuals, I think,
self-awareness is huge.
Right.
Recognizing that, hey, I might have a different communication style.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
But also being proactive about bridging that gap.
So maybe saying something up front like,
hey, just so you know, I tend to take things literally.
Right.
So if I ask you what you're doing on Friday, I actually want to know.
Exactly. And honestly, that kind of openness can go a long way in any relationship.
Another tip we came across was, you know how sometimes when we're trying to be extra clear,
right,
we almost end up sounding like we're talking down to someone
or
we're annoyed, even if we're not.
Right.
So just being mindful of that.
Okay.
And pausing to,
give people a little extra processing time can make a world of difference.
And I imagine it takes practice, right?
Sure.
On both sides to kind of develop that shared understanding.
Of course.
It's like learning a new dance together.
I love that analogy.
And just like with learning any new skill, I think, feedback is crucial.
Having those trusted people in your life who can give you that honest, constructive feedback on how your communication is landing, that's invaluable.
It's like, that saying, communication is key.
We often forget that, the lock is a little different for everyone.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
It's not about saying, this way of communicating is right or wrong. It's just recognizing that diversity, in all its forms, really enriches our interactions, right? If we all approached communication with the same assumptions,
right,
the same mental frameworks, imagine how limiting that would be,
Yeah, it'd be like everyone wearing noise-canceling headphones all the time.
We'd miss out on so much.
Exactly. And that's why I think
understanding literal thinking and neurodiversity in general is so crucial,
It's about expanding our own perspectives, learning to appreciate those different ways of experiencing the world.
Yeah, one thing that really struck me from the research was this idea that recognizing those miscommunication cues, it's a two-way street, right?
It's not just on the literal thinker to speak up.
Right.
It's on all of us to be more attuned to those moments when our message might not be landing.
Absolutely.
The way we intended it to.
Yeah, and it's not always about the words themselves either. Sometimes that's the tone of voice, right?
Yeah.
The body language. Those nonverbal cues that can make all the difference.
For sure. I know I've been guilty of, accidentally steamrolling someone in a conversation because I was so caught up in, what I was saying that I completely missed their, puzzled expression or their, subtle attempt to interject.
Right. And that's where,
self-awareness piece comes in, right?
Yeah.
For everyone.
Being able to take a step back, read the room, and adjust our communication style accordingly.
The research also had some really good advice on, what to do when we realize there has been a misunderstanding. Especially that whole, like, apology overload thing.
Oh, yeah.
Which I know I'm prone to.
We've all been there, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes a string of I'm sorries can actually make things worse.
Right.
Especially for someone who communicates literally.
Yeah.
They might just focus on the apology itself and miss the actual clarification.
Oh, totally, yeah.
So what's a better way to kind of handle those moments?
Instead of getting, like, bogged down in apologies.
Try simply acknowledging the misunderstanding.
Okay.
And then rephrasing your message.
Okay.
Something like,
I see where I wasn't clear. Let me try explaining that a different way.
Right.
Can be much more effective.
That makes a lot of sense.
And it feels more collaborative, too. Like you're both working together to, like, bridge that communication gap.
Exactly. And that's what it all comes down to, isn't it?
Building those bridges of understanding.
Right.
Recognizing that communication is a two-way street. And appreciating those unique perspectives that each person brings to the table.
This whole deep dive has been so eye-opening for me.
It's not just about understanding, like, literal thinking in a vacuum.
Yeah.
It's about becoming a better communicator overall.
I love that.
And I have to say, like, some of the research we've discussed, it raises, like, some really fascinating questions.
Yeah.
You know, for example, if someone's brain is wired for that laser focus on detail, you know,
right.
that ability to pick out the patterns, the inconsistencies that others might miss, how might that influence their experience of, like, art?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Of music.
Yeah.
Even of problem solving.
It makes you wonder what unique insights, they might offer in fields like research, engineering, even creative writing.
That's such an important point. It challenges us to look beyond those traditional definitions, right, of intelligence and communication and appreciate the incredible strengths that neurodiversity brings to our world.
100%.
There's so much more to explore in this space, and I really hope
that our conversation today encourages our listeners to do just that.
To keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep embracing the beautiful complexity of the human experience.
I love that.